The Straw Hats are officially in Elbaff. After over 1,000 chapters since it was first mentioned, we have finally made it to the land of giants. Or did we? Turns out that the place we're currently in is actually one ginormous cage meant to mimic Elbaff. The Straw Hats are seemingly just playthings to the quote sun god. Not to mention, but ever since we've arrived, we've been bombarded by deadly animals and we don't even know how we got here, thanks to that damn green fairy. Which could be a good advert to never drink past your limits, or at the very least, not to drink absinthe willy-nilly. The barrage of wild animals attacking us wouldn't have been so bad if we had Chopper alongside us to help communicate with the wildlife in these initial chapters. But he wasn't with us at first. Instead, he was being held outside of the toy box that the rest of the Straw Hats were in. Why was that? Chopper, out of all of the Straw Hats, was getting special treatment. I believe the reason why Chopper wasn't subjected to the toy box is because he is currently being viewed as a special creature. Perhaps he would have been placed as another one of the false sun god's guardians, or another, quote, god in the fake Elbaff replica. I know it sounds insane, but based on what we've seen in fake Elbaff thus far, with the giant rabbit being referred to as the ear god, and a giant hedgehog being referred to as the needle god, it isn't really that far-fetched. Even if he isn't being prepped for his fake Elbaffian godhood, he could still be held in high regard since the quote sun god who owns the toy box seems to be wearing a deer skull as a helmet. With Chopper being a reindeer, this could be what helps him curry favor with the giants of Elbaff. And let's be real, Chopper has always been an anomaly within the verse ever since he was first introduced. He was the only reindeer we've seen in the series that has a blue nose. While this is supposed to be a spin on Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, it is odd that his nose takes this color. And not just that, but while he did eat the Hito Hito no Mi model human, he doesn't resemble a human all too much. As shameful as it sounds, I'd probably be like one of the villagers of Drum Island calling him a monster if I saw him stumbling out of the woods. We've seen a plethora of other Zoan models that look exactly as how they're supposed to throughout the series. So why is Chopper's seemingly the only exception? And why was his devil fruit in the shape of a mushroom? Is this Oda's way of being ironic since a poisonous mushroom is what ended up killing Dr. Hiriluk? Or is it a call through to Mario's iconic power-up, the mushroom, which once he consumes, he becomes bigger? Or perhaps, is this just a joke since guys have... Besides Chopper though, even his mentor, Dr. Kureha, is shrouded in mystery. She was the one who first talked about the Will of D in the series, and even knew that Roger's real name was actually Gol D. Roger instead of Gold Roger. Was she maybe a pirate in his era that knew him personally? Because we quite honestly don't know yet. It's because of all of these question marks surrounding Chopper that I wanted to take a stab at what we could possibly see here on Elbaff that could either clear up some of these mysteries or just simply push his character to greater heights. Before we get to that though, let me just set up what I believe is happening currently in the story and what we will see in the near future of this arc. The sun god we see in chapter 1128 is probably just a crazy special giant role player who built himself a miniature version of Elbaff that is nearly identical to the real Elbaff, or at least a small snippet of the real Elbaff. This quote, sun god, was so meticulous and thoughtful that he even made the clothes of little people mirror what the giants would wear. With that being the case, I wouldn't even be surprised if the quote, needle god and ear god also exist in reality to some extent as well. And not just them, but also giant animals who tower above even the giants. Because lest we forget that on Egghead Island, Dory and Brogy did mention that the Gorsei remind them of the colossal beasts and animals of Elbaff. If that is true, then the animals that inhabit Elbaff should be much larger than what we saw in 1127 and 1128. The main point I want to get across is that there is most likely a real Big Stein Castle, genuinely large animals as grand as giants, and even a real Yggdrasil. The reason why I wanted to make this point is to talk about the importance of the real Yggdrasil tree and how Chopper could be connected to it all. In Norse mythology, there are accounts that talk about how there are 4 red deer named Dawin, Dvalin, Dunir, and Durathro that feast on the leaves of the Yggdrasil tree. And also, I hope I pronounced those names right, I'm trying my best here. Even in Valhalla, there exists a mythical deer, Eikthirmir, that also feeds on the tree's leaves. These deer in Norse mythology are respected and revered. So that fact, alongside the Elbaffian viewpoint of referring to certain animals as gods, leads me to believe in a future where Chopper is also hailed as a quote, god, or at the very least, he would have been considered a fake god in this LEGO Playhouse. Whether Oda substantiates this with a massive devil fruit reveal switcheroo, like Luffy's Gomu Gomu no Mi to the Hito Hito no Mi model sun god, doesn't even have to be the case here, because Chopper could come one step closer to his ultimate dream thanks to this potential connection to the Yggdrasil tree. In Norse mythology, the Yggdrasil tree has many names, such as the World Tree, the Sacred Ash Tree, and even the Tree of Life. I want to hone in on the latter here. It gained all these names because it is what connects all the 9 realms and even represents the cycle of life and death in some instances. While there are no accounts that say what the leaves of the Yggdrasil tree can provide, I do believe that Oda could perhaps take this into his own hands and have Elbaff's tree be one that can create miracles. One thing that stuck out to me as odd coming off of chapter 1127 was that one of the Elbaff residents mentioned that if the Yggdrasil tree burns down, then the country is finished. What did they mean by that? To what extent does Elbaff rely on this tree? Of course, this is the fake Baff Yggdrasil tree we're talking about, but I also bet that the real Yggdrasil tree also plays a pivotal role within Elbaff too. There have been many theories that the Yggdrasil tree is actually what's known as the Atom Tree around the world. If that's the case, then maybe it provides something that the giants desperately need in order to survive. The idea I want to propose is that maybe the leaves of the Yggdrasil tree can actually be turned into a medicine that can cure most diseases. So the idea behind this notion actually relates back to Usopp and Dr. Hiriluk. We've come to realize over the course of the series that most, if not all, of what Usopp has lied about has come true to a certain extent. Whether it's about the existence of Tontatus he mentioned back in chapter 24, the idea of a cat turning into a lion in chapter 424, or even that his first bounty would be 30 million back in chapter 114, Usopp just has a knack for turning his lies into reality. Maybe I've also been fooled by Usopp's fibs, but I do believe that one of his very first lies will become a reality as well, and that is the lie that he will find a medicine that can cure any disease. He technically made this lie twice thus far, with the first time being in reference to curing his mom in chapter 41, and then there's chapter 909, where he was reintroduced in Wano selling toad oil as a miracle cure-all. I believe that this miracle medicine will be discovered by Chopper in the near future, and that Elbaff holds a major clue in its creation. The reasoning behind why Elbaff is because of Usopp's inherent tie to the island. With this concept first stemming from an Usopp lie, it just feels right to have him being tied to this theory and Chopper's dream in some way. Which brings us to the next key character, Dr. Hiriluk. So not much is known about Hiriluk's life before Drum Island except for the brief bullet points that 1. He was once a thief, 2. He contracted a deadly disease that was deemed incurable, and 3. He was later cured when he laid eyes on a cherry blossom tree. Dr. Hiriluk's story sounds like something ripped out of a fairy tale. It's a story that doesn't make much logical sense. But what if there was some truth to what he was saying? What if there were a tree out there somewhere that could cure any and all illnesses? Maybe not by simply looking at it, but by taking their foliage and crafting medicine. What I'm getting at is that maybe the mythical Yggdrasil tree is a key ingredient in creating this miracle medicine. Arriving here in Elbaff could become a great stepping stone on Chopper's journey of medicine and scientific advancements. Just like how the deers in Norse mythology feed off of the leaves of the Yggdrasil tree, perhaps Chopper will take those leaves for himself and craft miracles. Going back to the giants talking about how without the tree, the country would be doomed, it would make sense if this tree was pivotal in their daily lives since it is what keeps them healthy and free from sickness. This would also explain why the Yggdrasil tree, if it is the Atom Tree, has the nickname Jewel Tree Atom. The jewels could be referring to the special foliage the tree produces and how invaluable this resource truly is as a medicinal herb. An interesting connection here could be the few diseases in the series that are named after jewels, such as Law's Amber Lead Disease and Bonnie's Sapphire Scales. With 2 diseases being directly tied to jewels, it would make sense if the Jewel Tree Atom is connected in some way. One interesting tidbit is that both Bonnie's Sapphire Scales and Law's Amber Lead Disease both were initially seen as incurable. Law was able to find a workaround cure for it thanks to the Ope Ope no Mi's powers, but Bonnie had to go to an actual doctor, Dr. Vegapunk, and it was he who cured her sickness. what is notable about Vegapunk being the one to cure her doesn't have to do with his massive brain and geniusness, but the fact that Vegapunk has been to Elbaf before. Perhaps the reason why he was able to cure Bonnie's jewel disease is due to his visit to Elbaf and the fact that he has seen the jewel tree atom in the past. And also, if Vegapunk's medicine came from the atom tree, then that would explain why he said the cost of the medicine and treatment would be so expensive. We saw firsthand that it costed Frankie 200 million berries to get enough atom wood to build the Thousand Sunny. So getting the leaves of the tree should be equally as expensive. So, why would they let Chopper near their national treasure, the Yggdrasil tree? Well, not only is he a deer that might be worshipped like those in Norse mythology, but he's also a rare, blue-nosed reindeer. Oda has a funny way of coming full circle when it comes to many characters and their backstories. And when it comes to Chopper, one of the few things we hardly touch on is how strange his nose is. While it seems like a moot point nowadays, his blue nose is what ostracized him from his family and community on Drum Island. He was kicked out of the pack for looking different. And then, when he later ate the Hito Hito no Mi, his problems got even worse. Chopper never fit in with the other reindeer, so perhaps here in Elbaf, he will fit in. Instead of the giant Elbafian deers ostracizing him, perhaps they welcome him with open arms and view him as their leader. Which also, I just gotta say, but I love that Oda had Chopper talk and or translate what Iskat said at the end of 1128, since that is a special and underutilized ability that really only Chopper has, which could be another grounds entirely to argue why Chopper would be referred to as a god. Imagine meeting a half-human, half-reindeer creature who can speak not just to humans, but the Elbafian animals too. That'd be kinda crazy. So earlier, I mentioned that Elbaf's tree could become a stepping stone in Chopper's journey. Why would it simply be a step if Yggdrasil can be turned into a miracle medicine? Well, it's because I believe that it cannot cure any disease yet. How I'm imagining it is that Yggdrasil could create a medicine that can cure 99.99% of diseases, like my hand soap, but it's that 0.01% that'll keep us up at night. One thing to keep in mind when talking about Chopper's journey is that by the end of it, he should be able to cure whatever illness Gold Roger the Pirate King had as well. Of course, he never mentioned verbatim that he wanted to be able to do that, but by him declaring he wants to beat all illnesses, Rogers would be on that list by default. To our knowledge, Roger has seemingly visited every island out there in the world. He's traveled from one end of the One Piece world to the other. If there were a cure out there, you'd think that he would have found it. But what if there was one place Roger didn't visit on his journey? A place that even Vegapunk called him out for not visiting? What if that answer lies within Marie Joie, in the hands of the world government? Atop the red line, that is where the Eve tree exists. When you think about the biblical references at play here, Adam and Eve always tend to be tied together. They were the ones who were in the garden with the tree of life and eventually ate from it. So it's not too far-fetched to believe that Oda is twisting this story, and together, the Adam and the Eve trees could be combined into something greater. The leaves and foliage of both the Adam and Eve tree could potentially be mixed and milled together, and that is what could create the ultimate cure. One nod that this could be what Oda is doing here is the fact that the Yggdrasil tree, along with the biblical tree that Adam and Eve ate from, both share the name, the Tree of Life. At first, I was of the mindset that perhaps Laugh-Tale holds a key ingredient for this miracle medicine, since we saw the pink-tinted background when Roger laughed there in the anime, and that instantly reminded me of Dr. Hiriluk and his cherry blossoms. But even after visiting Laugh-Tale, Roger wasn't cured, and Crocus in the flashback didn't mention anything about Laugh-Tale helping at all. So with that being the case, I don't believe the answer exists there. The answer to all of this and Chopper's dream has to be somewhere that isn't easily accessible to the former Pirate King, and that is why I believe that the answer lies at Marie Joie. This could be the grand conclusion to Chopper's dream, and it would give his journey with the Straw Hats a visible goal. We can all see how the Straw Hats' dreams can be achieved in the end. Luffy just needs to find the One Piece. Zoro just needs to beat Mihawk. Sanji's could come true once all the oceans combine thanks to the rising waters. Nami will be done once they visit all the islands. Frankie's can be completed in a similar fashion to Nami's, Brook just needs to get to the Twin Capes, Robin just needs to find the poneglyphs, Usopp's is a bit more abstract, but he just needs to become a brave warrior along his journey. And then there's Chopper, who doesn't really have a definite end unlike the others. By making Marie-Joie and Elbaff the Eve and Adam tree key steps in his journey to combating illness, it would put that extra gusto behind him in the subsequent arcs, and it would also give him a finite goal, a way to cure any illness. Funny enough, during Chopper's time skip training arc, he was dropped off in Torino Kingdom, which was an island that housed a single giant tree in the middle of it, and that tree birthed many plants that were great for his medicine. So the idea that the Adam and Eve tree could house rare ingredients for Chopper isn't that insane. Another tie-in could be that Torino Kingdom was often referred to as Treasure Island, which could also be seen as a nice hint at the importance of the treasure tree Adam, and even works as a nice tie-in to the jeweled diseases, the amber-led sickness, and the sapphire scales. Another fun fact would be that in chapter 820's cover page story, we even got a brief update regarding this island, and we saw that Chopper's research there was so significant that he actually owns a shop called Tanukichi's Drugstore, with the main product being Chopper's medicine. And also, there's the whole running gag of people calling Chopper a Tanuki, which could come full circle since Tanukis have a habit of climbing trees and eating their foliage. And not to mention, in most Japanese mythologies, Tanukis are able to turn tree leaves into varying objects as well. So Chopper turning the Adam and Eve tree's leaves into a miracle medicine would fit this thematic. So now, to play devil's advocate, even if the Yggdrasil tree or Adam tree don't provide this miracle medicine, I still believe it will play a pivotal role when it comes to Chopper's advancement of his humble rumble ball. I believe that his rumble balls could be a key reason as to why the animals of Elbaff will come to respect him. We saw that the cat the Straw Hats fought back in chapter 1127 was able to alter its form and turn into a lion. What if that transformation ability is what determines which animals are revered in Elbaff? While we don't know if that cat lion was considered a god, we do know that it wore a crown, so that could be a hint that it held a title to some extent. Once Chopper flexes his multiple transformations, then maybe the Elbaff animals will rally behind him as a quote, master of sorts. We saw that back in Wano, Chopper was able to cook up a ball that Beppo later swallowed to go into his Sulong form against Blackbeard. Chopper was able to manipulate a ball to reproduce the effects of the full moon. This could be another hint that the legendary Adam and Eve tree could be huge in Chopper's journey, since the Eve tree is dubbed as the quote, sunlight tree. Chopper is already tinkering with the effects of the moon. Once he gains the knowledge of the sun tree, then perhaps he will hit a new level entirely in the realms of science. In SPS 100, someone asked Oda, why does Black Maria's hybrid form look the way it does if she ate a Zoan devil fruit? Typically, her face should be taking on a more spider-like appearance, but instead, she retains her beauty as a woman when in her hybrid form, and instead gains a spider face near her crotch. And Oda said, it was due to a drug much like Chopper's, and it was due to that drug that she was able to mold her Zoan transformation into what it is today. We don't know much about the drug that caused this, but perhaps the answer lies here in Elbaff. Whatever Black Maria used to alter her Zoan form could be heralded by Chopper in the future, and perhaps then he could achieve a brand new transformation that makes him appear more human too. Outside of One Piece, I am a major Bleach fan as well, so this does remind me of Komamura and how he is an anthropomorphic wolf whose ultimate form is that of a human. Chopper could be the same way. Maybe Chopper's final Rumble Ball or Awakening could have him taking on a more godlike human appearance, and this will be his ultimate fighting form. An adverse spin on this could be that Chopper's Devil Fruit, being the Hito Hito no Mi model human, could allow him to transform into any humanoid creature. Like mentioned previously, Chopper's Zoan forms resemble nothing of a regular human. Instead, to me at least, he actually resembles a mink. So a crazy idea that could spin from this would be the thought that Chopper could become any humanoid race within reason. A buccaneer, a long arm, a long leg, a mink, or even a giant. This might be too broken of an ability for the little guy, but just imagine him tapping into the fighting potential of all these different races. he could get the flexibility of those long-limbed freaks, the durability of buccaneers, the strength of the giants, or even the Sulong form and electric powers of the minks. He's already displayed weird transformations in the past that seem to mimic the races we've encountered, like for example, his Kung Fu point and how it takes on the shape of the tribesmen from Torino Kingdom, and even how his arm point and leg point could be a spin on the long arm and long legs already, but just without any of the extra joints. Dr. Vegapunk mentioned that devil fruits are born from the boundless imagination and desires of mankind. In that regard, Chopper's devil fruit would be a little bit of an anomaly. Forget wondering about who would wish to become a jacket man, but instead, who would wish to become human? Did an animal or a different race dream of this ability? And if so, what version of human did they envision? The minks view humans as simply hairless minks. So what are the nuances of being a human anyways? These questions don't ever have to be answered or tackled, quite honestly. Oda has left many plot points open throughout the series, and this just works in not just Chopper's, but many characters' favors, since he can simply open up this subject whenever he wants, or never touch it at all. Oda made sure not to write himself into a box, that's for sure. Another oddity that could be surmised from the importance of the Eve Tree and its medicinal properties could be tied back to Dr. Kureha. Just like Dr. Hiriluk, not much is known about her past, but we do know that she is quite possibly the oldest living human in the series thus far, since she is currently 141 years old. Oda has stated in SBS 56 that a normal human typically lives up until they're 140 years old, so Kureha existing in this corporeal dimension right now is a bit odd. But what if she was able to live this long because of the effects of the Eve Tree? So, this could be a whole other theory on its own, but I do believe that Kureha might be a former resident of Marie Joie. To keep this nice and simple, it has to do with their knowledge of the Will of D, her lifespan, Chopper's mysteriously low bounty, and her laugh. Everyone in the series has a unique laugh, and Dr. Kureha is no different, with her laugh being the distinctive heh heh heh. This laugh is supposed to mimic that of an old witch's, but more notably, when dubbed in Japanese, it takes on more of a geh 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 sound, which could be in reference to an old 1960s anime called Gegege no Kitoru, which is a story about a young boy who lives among yokai and eventually sets out to bridge the gap and unite humans and yokai alike. This story could have been a major inspiration in regards to the creation of Dr. Kureha's character. We've seen before that celestial dragons have left their humble abode and set off to the human world to live peacefully, like the Don Quixote family for example, so perhaps Dr. Kureha is in a similar boat. She got tired of living among the dragons and yokai and wanted to come down from her perch and live among humans instead. This former status of hers could explain why Chopper has been able to fly under the radar for so long too. We've seen before that people with ties to the world government can alter the news and bounties as they like how Judge was able to make Sanji's bounty poster say, "Wanted only alive," and how Doflamingo was able to fake his resignation of the Shishibukai. Perhaps Kureha has been the reason why Chopper is only seen as a quote pet of the Straw Hats and is always given such a low bounty. One thing to take note of is that Chopper having the title of quote pet could be a callback to how she referred to Chopper as a weird pet in chapter 144. Kureha altering Chopper's bounty so that he goes under the radar would be a very motherly thing to do, since we've seen firsthand just how protective she was of him back on Drum Island. Back to the reason why I brought her up in the first place, but I do believe that she may know how to live longer than humans were intended to live simply because she was in close proximity to the Sunlight Tree Eve. Of course, this version of immortality would be slightly different from Saint Saturn's immortality, since he was most likely granted those powers by Imu. Kureha's version could possibly just be temporary life prolongation in comparison to Saturn's immortality and demonic forms. Chopper, creating a miracle medicine that is this potent, could be harmful if given liberally. Whether it's harmful for humanity or harmful to the stakes of the story, that can be debated later. What I want to talk about here is how Oda can make it to where only Chopper is able to craft this medicine, and how he could have exclusive rights to it and even put his own spin on it. So, there have been lots of talk and theories throughout the series that Luffy might destroy the Red Line one day. This thought actually spawned all the way back in chapter 129, where Dory and Brogy mentioned that their Hakkoku sovereignty can defeat anything other than the blood-soaked serpent. Many believe that since Elbaf warriors are Viking and Norse themed, that this blood-soaked serpent they're referring to is Jormungand, the legendary world-eating serpent from Norse mythology. The existence of Jormungandr is actually somewhat hinted at, or at least brought into the equation in chapter 1128, with the sun god's pet snake being named Hilmungandr, which is definitely a spin-off of the mythological Norse snake too. The most common assumption right now is that the One Piece version of Jormungandr is actually the red line. The redness of the wall could be the blood-soaked properties that they're referring to, and not to mention, most depictions of Jormungand has it wrapped in a perfect loop which is similar to the red line's formation in the One Piece world. If this is indeed the reference Oda is trying to make here, then perhaps we have been destined from the start to tear this wall down. Where the giants failed in taking down the blood-soaked serpents, Luffy will succeed. One of the fallouts of destroying the Red Line would be the destruction of the Eve Tree, since it exists atop it. This would then fulfill Madame Charlie's prediction of Luffy destroying Fishman Island that she made back in chapter 610. But the Eve Tree isn't the only tree that has theories surrounding its demise, as the Atom Tree, or Yggdrasil, is facing similar theoried threats. Since Oda is thrusting us into the Norse world, one key event told time and time again in mythology is the existence of Ragnarok. Ragnarok, to give a very brief explanation, is the penultimate war against the gods. There are many iterations of how this war goes down, but a growing sentiment in the One Piece community is that this war might take place in our story with the world versus the celestial dragons, the quote, gods of the One Piece world. And this war might be triggered by the destruction of Yggdrasil. I'm not too sure how the real Yggdrasil tree could fall, but this could perhaps be done by a massive fire, and the threat of the fake Yggdrasil tree succumbing to flames is foreshadowing of this destructive event. If the Adam and Eve tree perish, this would definitely limit Chopper's venture and his farming of materials from both of them. What if he then tries to recreate these trees or medicine, just like how Dr. Hiriluk tried to recreate the tree he envisioned on his journey? While this seems far-fetched, I enjoy the idea that Chopper ends up creating a pink cherry tree grove that is able to mimic the medicinal foliage that the Adam and Eve tree provided. Not only would this nerf the potentially insane medicine that he could create, but it could become something specific to only Chopper. Chopper's final medicine and tree grove could mimic the medicine and grove that Dr. Hiriluk was searching for all his life. Since the Sun God seemingly has a mock version of Yggdrasil in his toy box, perhaps that is actually a tree that spawned from the real Yggdrasil seed. If the false Sun God can bring forth a mini Yggdrasil, then perhaps Chopper could do this too one day with the Adam and the Eve trees. You might be thinking that I'm crazy for proposing this idea, but I just gotta say, this has actually happened in the past, well before we've even set foot on Elbaff. Since, in One Piece film Gold, Gil Tesoro had a mini Jewel Tree Atom on his ship. While this movie is not canon, Oda still wrote a good amount of it and approved the movie. So Chopper getting a mini Jewel Tree Atom is not really that insane. I've talked at length now about how Elbaff could be Usopp's Arc, or how Frankie could get some shine now that he's here with the Lilith Vegapunk, or how Nami could finally learn about the Giants' lifestyle and come to respect it. And quite honestly, I can see all of that and more happening here on Elbaff. Elbaff, or any arc, isn't limited to just one character's growth, and I always feel like there's room for Chopper in there, if Oda wants to go that route. The thing is though, is that now that we're in the final stretch of One Piece, I do believe that all of the dreams of the crew will have to start being tackled more head-on. So Chopper's dream of curing any disease being tied to Usopp's lies with the Adam and Eve tree could give him a visible goal and would tie in well since his dream would be fulfilled around the same time as the other Straw Hats.